When I started looking through all the chassis, I was like, man, if I could somehow get my hands on a Skyline R34, that would be like unbelievable. Like that's literally one of my favorite all-time cars, if not favorite all-time car. I mean, and I know a lot of you guys can relate. It's like watching Paul Walker and Fast and Furious. Like R34 Skyline's fucking legendary, dude. Like so sick. And so I was like, well, I don't even know, they're not legal, right? So I was like, how the hell do I get one? And so I was searching for months, and ended up finding a R34 Skyline out in California. It was a 14,000 kilometer Skyline R34, and I was like what? Like completely stock too. It was just white car. It had literally had like no rust, and so I ended up kind of figuring out what the story was, and it was, I don't know who owned it, but I'm assuming it was like a grandmother or something in Japan, because it was like just had like some mint things hanging from the mirror and was like just completely stock and had like grocery receipts in it. And so kind of what I've just assumed, let's say, and it sounds like a funny story, is that it was just like some grandma's grocery getter. So when we went out to pick up the car, I was like blown away at how clean this thing was. Like the paint, kind of the clear was like a little bit crappy, but when you looked under the fender well, the car is white, right? And when you look under the fender well, literally they're like completely clean white. And I was like, how is this possible? And the outside was dusty, so it hadn't been cleaned. And so it was just literally like that low mileage and barely used. There was a little bit of surface rust like on the frame rails. I believe it was like sitting in outside and just maybe like snow piled up or something. But it was just crazy clean. No crashes, no scratches, nothing like that. So we rolled out there with our flatbed, picked it up, and we were like all sketched out about having this car. So we like whipped it back to Phoenix that night. We drove to San Francisco and back, like just straight. So it was like, I don't know, ended up being like 24 hours or something, just there and back. When we got it back to the shop, that's kind of like simultaneously when I was looking for the car, I was like collecting parts for it. And I knew I wanted it to be like super unique, super Japanese inspired, but then with definitely like my own style put into it, the Haugen Racing style. And so we ended up finding Euros was making this brand new like prototype kit. It was like the Monkey Magic Type RR, and we had just seen like a couple like pre-release photos of it, and I was like, that is sick. It was kind of like old school style brought to like the new age. And so ended up having, with Mastermind's help, ended up hitting up those guys, and they were like, yeah, we can get you a kit. And so we ended up making like the second kit for us, which was super cool. And that's kind of what set off like the rest of the car. We knew we wanted 3-piece wheels, so ended up partnering with Rotiform. We got the 3-piece wheels on it, and like bride seats, did like carbon shifter. My dad spent like a couple days in the garage, tore the motor out and tore it down to just like a roller. And the next step was to do like the major fab work. So we ended up getting the car acid dipped, which is pretty much how it sounds. You just dip the whole chassis with nothing on it into acid, and it strips all paint, all rubber, literally anything that's not metal. And so when it comes out, it's like completely clean. You can weld right on it. You don't even need to grind anything. And from there started the fab work. So we did like the roll cage, the bash bars, mounting the fuel cell, the motor, transmission, all that stuff. And so then once it was pretty much had the major items placed, it ended up getting teared down, and then we ended up powder coating the whole chassis and getting all like the different parts, like the subframes, all the suspension, re-powder coated so they could be our colors, and then kind of made it a roller again. So from there we did the plumbing and wiring, and then it was time for paint. So we ended up, so essentially like these are fiberglass, so underneath this was all powder coated red. So anything that was going to be on the outside of like the panels, we ended up, King's Auto Body Shop ended up like scuffing the whole thing and then spraying our trademark yellow on it. And so kind of the effect we were looking for was like yellow outside, red inside with blue accents. So after paint was done, ended up getting it tuned, going out for a little test day, and having numerous problems, as you guys are probably aware if you've been watching our videos. But ended up bringing it back to the factory, to the HR factory, doing like final mount and fitment on all the panels, wheels, like little details like the pillows on the bride seats and Pikachu, like all the fun stuff, right? And then ended up installing the sick Super Wild livery on top. And so like, if you guys didn't catch it, this is paint and then like literally individual layers of vinyl all on top. And then the stars are reflective, like gradient from top to bottom. So it's like super unique, super sick, and kind of matches our whole theme. So after that was done, the car was complete at this point, at least theoretically. But that's kind of when, aside from all the problems with building it, with partners being like literally 6 months late and not doing their jobs, there was still a lot of issues with kind of how things were done, and some things were rushed. The fab work was like absolutely beautiful, and all the fab work is pretty much flawless in my mind, but it's kind of the other stuff, some of like the plumbing, some of the wiring, just kind of more like hardware related, I guess I would say, is where we're having a lot of issues. So ended up finishing the car, had that initial test day, end of June, and then it was literally like we had to go to round 3, and so we were kind of forced to only get basically a test day and a half in before hitting round 3. And round 3 was just full of issues. St. Louis, it was like the M cell failed, the injectors got completely plugged up, and we were just kind of running around just trying to figure it out, and ended up literally getting no practice laps in and just doing our 2 qualifying laps completely blind. Like when I say no practice laps in, we didn't get 1 lap. I had literally rode the track on a pit bike, and then it was like, all right, get the hell out there. And I only had 1 glove on because it was like such a rush. Like Jameson, our spotter and crew chief, he had to be down in the pits, so we weren't really watching the grid, and it was just like, I literally went out there with 1 glove on, which like may not sound like a big deal, but it was like, it was just crazy. It was a rush. So I did what I could. The car still had issues. It was breaking up on turns, kind of causing me to straighten out. And then the second run ended up, car still breaking up, but it was like actually somewhat of an okay run. I think it would have qualified me, but then we hadn't had any time to practice and figure out tire pressures, and just ended up, and time for me to really learn the track. And so at the end, we ended up spinning out. And so double zeroed, event was a wash. And then it was time, the gap wasn't really all that long between round 3 and round 4, and it was time to kind of figure this thing out. So ended up making a bunch of changes, fixing things, and going out to grid life, and ended up being another complete failure, finding more issues. So then after grid life, we ended up redoing the entire fuel system, got 1 test day in. It seemed to be working well, but then when we got out here to round 4 at Texas Motor Speedway, the car is just continuing to have issues, and it's just like craziness. So we ended up getting 1 full practice session in. Car was kind of breaking up. It was doing okay, had a couple decent laps, and then the map sensor ended up failing. So we were kind of running around trying to find a map sensor, which was really hard, and we found a similar one, and then it ended up pretty much failing again constantly through the next practice session and the qualifying laps. And so we ended up getting a score though, which was for the first time this season, which was kind of a win, honestly. Like, we didn't qualify, but we put down points. So that was cool. I think in all, like, that kind of makes this event, in a way, the Texas event, a success. But we're still kind of finding issues, like the injectors are plugged up again. And so from here on out, it's season's over competitive wise. It's just time to like get the car dialed in, get it working, and go drive and make this thing fun again. So that is kind of how to build a Skyline in 10 minutes. If things go well, I think you could do it, but they didn't go so well for us. But we do have a beautiful car, and we're super proud of it, and we're gonna get it working, and we're gonna be out there. So stay tuned, guys, for real. If you're watching this video and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, for real. It really helps us.